It is a brand new season, week number 1. It's NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer. Mike Yam, Eric Edholm with you. Eric, I'm walking into the studio. I heard a rumor. Please tell me if this is true or not, that you had no summer vacation. You spent the entire time obsessing over this set of rankings.
Well, yeah, early on I was ranking like breakfast cereals and my kids' Pokemon cards and stuff. And I got so bored with it, I had to dive into football, and it's been a grind. I'm glad we got to this point unscathed, and we're ready to go, man.
Look, I'm so excited to be with you this entire season. I had a blast with you last season. There was a lot of debate. I don't know how much debate we will have in this episode, but we should reveal some of your top teams and get to it. And not a surprise here. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles sitting in that top spot. We got the Baltimore Ravens, who we'll talk about. The Bills right behind them at 3. Kansas City, here we go. Rashee Rice, that 6-game suspension maybe plays a factor in that 4th ranking. Detroit missing all of their coordinators, both on the offense and defensive side, who are both head coaches. So they are in that 5th spot. A little bit of news this offseason around the Green Bay Packers, who sit 6. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 7 and the Washington Commanders at number 8. All right, Super Bowl letdown coming off of winning the title last year. How does Philadelphia make sure and ensure they're back in the biggest game of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I don't just default put the Super Bowl winner in this spot. I think they're there for a good reason. This roster's in terrific shape thanks to Howie Roseman and the scouting staff. They're well coached. I mean, Nick Sirianni had to go through it a little bit before he got to the mountaintop, but by the end of last year, they were clearly the best team in football. Can they carry that over, though? I think that is a fair question, especially when you consider, look, they're arguably worse on the offensive line. They lose Becton, arguably worse on the defensive line, Williams and Josh Sweat, and maybe in the secondary too. So it's possible that they are not quite as full a roster as what they had at the end of last year. So still some potential cracks that other teams could exploit.
Still very talented, and wouldn't be a surprise to anyone if they were playing in the Super Bowl this upcoming season. And yet I look at some of the other premier teams in the NFL, in fact, some of the teams that I just name-checked that you have towards the top of this rankings. The Baltimore Ravens sitting at number 2. Eric, they were a team that I got to see in training camp. I don't legitimately think they have a weakness on this roster. In my mind, they might be the best team in the NFL.
They're right there. You could make certainly a strong case, even with last year's playoff disappointment, the loss of the Bills, that they are pound for pound as good as the Eagles or any other team in the NFL. It starts with Lamar Jackson, but obviously John Harbaugh has been there a long time. His record is terrific. He's had way more winning seasons than losing ones. And, the combination of Derrick Henry, maybe some better receivers as well. They continue to kind of fortify that offensive line. And by the end of last year, I thought that defense had really kind of gotten through some of its issues. So, look, they use now September and October to prepare themselves for the long haul. So I don't think we should panic if they lose week 1 to the Bills or have some early losses to contenders. They'll be there in January, and I suspect they're going to be a very, very tough out no matter how long they go.
You concerned at all about Derrick Henry and just the amount of tread on those tires?
I mean, we're talking about a guy who's turning 32 in January. Running backs these days don't typically last as long as that. I mean, coming off a season, counting playoffs, where he had almost 400 touches. So, they kept 4 backs. In years past, we've seen them keep 3, but there's a reason why they have Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill and Rasheen Ali, who had a great preseason too, was a draft pick of theirs a couple years ago. So, they have ways where you can kind of save Derrick for those key drives, fourth quarter situations like that, red zone, and still use those other 3 guys you have on the roster.
By the end of the season, Malachi Stark's a kid that they drafted. Eric, I have a feeling we're going to be talking about him on this show as the season unfolds. My God, he looked terrific on the football field, at least at that practice that I was able to go and watch. At number 3, the Bills. We had a conversation a year ago at this time, concerned about some of the weapons around Josh Allen. He became league MVP. Is that at all a concern this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same questions we had last year, right? Defense and weapons. And if you assume that Khalil Shakir, again, he missed a lot of the preseason and training camp, but if he can take a step forward, that's huge. James Cook is a weapon in the passing game as well as the run game. I was out there at the Bills joint practice with the Chicago Bears, and I thought Keon Coleman looked tremendous. He had a really big day that year, and all the rookie year disappointments, and ups and downs that he went through. I wouldn't be shocked if there's a sophomore breakout there. Josh Palmer's there. Dalton Kincaid still has a chance to prove himself. So They're pretty diverse. They may not have that one true go-to guy. Maybe it's Shakir. Maybe they spread the ball around. But if he can win MVP with arguably a lesser group last year, I think they're in okay shape in the big picture.
Take holistically between the second team and the third team, Ravens and Bills, do you look at both of these squads and say, hey, it feels like Super Bowl or bust? It is so hard to consistently have a good roster year in and year out in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, you say to yourself, look, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are in the primes of their career. Let's not panic here. But there always is that sense when you're ending up in the top 5 of every preseason, rankings, power rankings, and you're constantly making these runs in the playoffs, but coming up just short, as those two teams have recently. You're going to be mentioned as a Super Bowl or bust kind of team. And I think that's the attitude in the locker room. But obviously, only one of these teams potentially can win it. And the next year, we're going to be talking about both of them as contenders again, I suspect. So, yes, there is that internal pressure. There's certainly external pressure, but I don't think you can say the windows are closed for either one of these teams. It's just another year in that picture where they can win a ring or they could be disappointed.
Yeah, I'm sure you're watching Hard Knocks like I am and the Bills. Just one comment that you got on this defense and obviously some losses in terms of personnel from last year's team. Still feel like the unit collectively is still pretty good.
I do too. Turnovers, they've got to create more sacks, big plays, things like that. Worried about cornerback, though. I mean, I look at Tre'Davious White return. He and Christian Benford are supposed to be the starters right now with Maxwell Harrison out, but both guys have missed a good amount of practice. So you're going into a pretty big game in week 1. I know everything I just said about the Ravens there, but still, those are the games that end up being crucial tiebreakers when it comes down to playoff time. So I know, it's in Highmark Stadium, final year there. They're going to send it off with a bang, or so they hope. And if that defense isn't healthy enough, they're missing some D linemen too with suspensions and whatnot. That first game could be a real chore.
Yeah, I know I joked at the start of the show that Eric was working on his rankings the entire summer. There is some truth to that, but I got to imagine when you have a mega deal, there's a team that possibly moved up just a little bit just because of that Micah Parsons deal. Time for Power Moves. It is presented by Energizer. Where'd you have Green Bay before the Micah trade? Because right now you have them 6th.
Yeah, I believe I had them I think I had them 8th, and I wanted to keep the Bucs 7. I know that's higher than some people have them, but I kind of believe in the Bucs this year. But I felt like that move kind of put them over the top. Had I been a power ranker back in 2018, I probably would have done a similar thing with the Chicago Bears. But, this Packers team, I remember going on radio in Wisconsin this summer. They asked me about the roster, and they said, what do you think? And I said, well, it's pretty good. I mean, there's really no major questions, kind of like what you were saying with the Ravens. But the difference is the Ravens have superstar players. I don't know that you could have said that about the Packers prior to this trade, but Micah Parsons is a singular defender. And boy, if you want just a teaser, I think, of what could be on the table this season, assuming his back is okay, go look at Jeff Hafley, their defensive coordinator, what he did with Chase Young. Remember how excited we got about Chase Young as a college player in 2019, standing up as a middle linebacker, edge rusher, kicking inside as an interior rusher. You're going to see all kinds of creative stuff from Hafley when it comes to Parsons, but he's getting epidurals for week 1. That back may not hold up. That may be another factor to the trade that some people didn't kind of consider at the time that Dallas made it.
Last offseason, Jordan Love gets a huge deal, $200 million contract, gets banged up early, but you saw this progression. You saw him play better as the season went on. I hate to ask if there's more pressure. I don't even want to frame it that way. Every single starter in the NFL feels that, but knowing that there's a elite defender, at least singular, with Micah Parsons on this roster, that conversation's shifted. I almost feel like there's probably more attention on Jordan Love having to ball out and maybe even thrust himself into that MVP conversation.
Oh, no doubt about it. Look, I mean, he's already been paid, right? It's the same situation that Trevor Lawrence finds himself in Jacksonville, obviously with less pressure because they're not quite a Super Bowl contender yet. But a quarterback who's been paid, but there's still lingering doubts about them, right? Kyler Murray in Arizona, stuff like that, where you say they could be great, but we don't know that yet. And when you add a superstar to the other side of the ball, that defense could elevate itself. In one way, that may reduce some pressure on Love, right? They may have more defensive scores, more turnovers, more possessions for the offense. But on the other side, it knows, you know now that you are in that Super Bowl inner circle, if you will. You have that superstar, and you have a pretty great roster. Even with a loaded NFC North, I think you have to consider the Packers among that that top cadre of top contenders.
Eric, I read your article. Once again, it's on NFL.com where you give analysis on all 32 teams in order of this rankings. And I can't help but think when I shift our attention to the Washington Commanders at number 8, the parallels in what you said about the Houston Texans from a couple seasons ago.
Yeah.
They went from darlings, a team that become almost a sleeper to make a significant run, to now just being a really good team in the AFC. A lot of that has to do with C.J. Stroud. I'd say the same exact case could be made for Jaden Daniels. How does he avoid, and I don't want to say a sophomore slump because that's not what C.J. went through.
Sure.
I think that's probably overstating it. Clearly it wasn't as good as his rookie campaign, but what is it about what you see from Jaden Daniels that have you thinking like, hey, this team legitimately can stay towards the top of the NFC?
Yeah, I did drop them this week, and preemptively, I guess you'd say, or whatever, and some people may take that as a sign that I'm suddenly down on the Commanders. Not the case, right? I won you guys over by ranking you the Commanders higher than any other person did, I think, last year preseason. Yeah. So I felt like I got a little credit from Commanders fans. I hope I don't lose it now, but I just think it's going to be a tougher climb. Everybody knows they're contenders, right? Progress for quarterbacks is not linear. We've seen quarterbacks like Stroud, very talented players in year 2, face some obstacles that they weren't seeing in year 1. All of a sudden, now you have way more tape to evaluate and a whole summer to do it. While I was doing power rankings, the coaches were breaking down Jaden Daniels' tape, finding ways to slow him down. Arguably, they might be better offensively.
Yeah.
I just don't know if they're going to take that big step defensively that everybody is kind of hoping and wishing they can. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. If they are, I'll reflect it in the rankings, no doubt about it. But I think it's going to be a tougher division. I think the Giants are going to be a tougher out. We'll see about Dallas, but certainly Philly as well. So, just getting to 13-4 and a couple playoff wins is an amazing achievement. Can they do it 2 years in a row? Hard to do in this league.
Yeah. Well, they open up against the G-men. We'll talk about the Giants a little bit later in the show. Can't you make the case, at least I would, between Debo and Tunsil? This roster, and I know it's just 2 guys, but I feel like the roster is actually better this year than it was last season.
It might be, right? Josh Connerly, they're raving about the rookie tackle. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, right? He emerged and allowed them to trade Brian Robinson, who wasn't deemed a perfect fit. So when they're making those kinds of moves, I think it's a reflection that there were some voids last year that they were able to kind of mask and cover up. This year, they're able to fill them with some better talents and make these aggressive trades. They wouldn't have done that if they didn't think they had a shot at the Super Bowl. So, I trust Adam Peters, his evaluation, Dan Quinn, the coaching job he did last year. If those 2 guys are as on point this year as they were last year, they should be right in the thick of things.
Glad you name-checked Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I actually was fortunate enough to be able to call the East-West Shrine Bowl. He played in that game. Hard runner, was around him for a couple days or so. Not hugely surprised that they feel confident in his abilities in that backfield. We're just scratching the surface here, Eric. We're going through your rest of your rankings, 9 through 16. I still can't believe, based off of doing this show with you last season, we haven't mentioned his name. Aaron Rodgers, although he's got a new team. Where does he sit with his Steelers squad? That's coming up next here on Power Rankings, presented by Energizer. Back here on Power Rankings, Mike Hamm and Eric Edholm with you as you look at Eric's teams 9 through 16. The Denver Broncos checking in at number 9, potential to be the best defense in the league this year. At 10, it's the Cincinnati Bengals, who we'll discuss in a moment. 11, the LA Rams. The health of Matthew Stafford is going to be something we don't stop talking about this season. At 12, it's the Vikings with a new quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. At 13, it's the Texans. 14, the Chargers. The Niners at 15. And the Pittsburgh Steelers with Aaron Rodgers sitting at number 16. But let's circle in on Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's team, we saw this late season push for him. The guy should have been, well, I guess he was technically in that MVP conversation, but when you have a record, you're on the outside looking into the postseason, hard to win that award, plus the way that Josh and Lamar played, that was going to be an uphill battle. But give me your take on why you have Cincinnati this high, because I feel like based off what we saw last season, this is bold.
Well, you make a great point in that, Trey Hendrickson played a full season. Joe Burrow had virtually a career year, was incredible by, any other standards. And they were a 9-8 football team, right? They had so many issues defensively, penalties, lack of discipline, kind of got back in the race nominally at one point, but never were able to sustain it and stop people on the other side of the ball. But I think getting Hendrickson signed, at least for this year, it's a 1-year deal. They're probably going to part ways next season. But if you view this through the lens of they kept their big 3 on offense and Hendrickson, maybe new defensive coordinator Al Golden can find some solutions on that side of the ball. You know, look at what happened with the Chargers last year. Pretty low-ranked defense in 2023. Jim Harbaugh, new staff comes in, they clean things up. They're ranked in the top 5 in several categories. I'm not saying they're going to make that big a jump, but I do think there's a chance they get better on that side of the ball. Yeah, the division is tough and maybe even tougher than last year, but I still think that prolific offense is going to give a lot of people trouble at some point.
Last 2 seasons, 1-3 to start the year. I feel like this staff has recognized that. We saw Joe Burrow, we saw Jamar Chase early in the preseason get some run. So I feel like that's something we hadn't seen in previous years. Joe obviously has had some health issues, which was a part of that. But the fact that he was playing early in the preseason to me says, no, not a slow start this upcoming season. Time for Future Champions. It's presented by FanDuel and the NFC West. Here's what FanDuel thinks in terms of who is the favorite. It's the San Francisco 49ers. According to them, followed by the Rams, the Cardinals, and then Seattle, plus 550 there. So the Niners are the favorite. And God, Eric, I could story this for you. Just be healthy. They're the walking wounded out there a year ago. Is it as simple as they stay healthy, this division's theirs?
I think you have to preface it by saying, look, pound for pound, this may not be as strong a roster top to bottom as it was a year ago, at least heading into the season, right? All those injuries certainly decimated their chances of climbing back in the race. You know, they won that game in week 10 last year. I thought, okay, here they come. And then everything just fell apart. So your point holds true, right? If they avoid injuries, they should be in great shape. The schedule is very favorable. They still have Brock Purdy, Kyle Shanahan, and a host of weapons. But I do worry about that receiver room. You saw Deebo Samuel there a second ago. He's gone. Jawan Jennings, is he committed to the team? Is he involved? Is he going to be a big player this year? Perhaps. We'll see. You know, George Kittle will be a standby, and they're hoping that Ricky Pearsall is going to be that big threat on the outside as well. But I think they'll eventually find a lot of solutions, especially going up against a schedule that ranks as, frankly, one of the easiest in the NFL this season, even if there are no true easy games in this league.
Yeah, for what it's worth, and I know Arizona wasn't in this group because we went teams through 9 through 16, so they'll be in the next group. For what it's worth, I read your column once again on NFL.com. You're higher on Arizona than most are, and I think you could story Seattle being right in the thick of things as well. The Steelers at number 16. All right, Aaron Rodgers, man, I feel like we talk about this dude all the time. Last year with the Jets, last couple seasons with the Jets. Is this experiment going to be successful this year?
I don't know. You could tell I'm hedging here, right? I'm putting them smack dab in the middle of the rankings there. And obviously you look at Mike Tomlin's, a sterling record of consistency. I know obviously playoff results have not been what you'd expect recently in the last, really 7-8 years, but they're a good football team. They have what could be an excellent defense. There are some very encouraging parts there on offense, but in order to get this offense where it needs to be, I think Aaron has to give a little bit, right? I think he has to understand that run game with Warren and Johnson is still going to be a big part of what they do. Aaron's results certainly in the first half of last year, but even in parts of the second half of the season, lacking in a lot of ways. He is not the quarterback he was 5 years ago when he was an MVP candidate. So there's got to be an understanding, I think, of what his limitations are, what the strengths of the Steelers are, and find that perfect marriage to put it together offensively. So you talked about slow starts with the Bengals. I almost wonder if that's not an issue for the Steelers too, where they're still maybe sorting their offensive identity out as we come to the beginning of October. Who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he finds his footing right away. But I still think with Aaron, he wants things his way, and other people may see it differently.
Well, I think most teams would want to avoid a slow start, a little extra motivation for Aaron Rodgers, the fact that they get the Jets in week number 1.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're at the midway point here. First 16 teams, we've told you where they sit. The rest of the 16, 2 squads in my mind, Chicago Bears, Dallas Cowboys, no more Michael. Where do they sit? The answer to that. Oh, by the way, who's in that last spot, the not so coveted last position on Eric's rankings? The answer is coming up next on Power Rankings. Along with Eric at home, Mike Gann with you. Welcome back to Power Rankings. It's teams 17 through 24. For what it's worth, Eric is high. He's bullish on the Arizona Cardinals, who check in at 17. The Bears, who we'll talk about in a moment, at 18. Seattle Eric's looking for a team identity. They check in at 19. I think there's some upside around the Atlanta Falcons at 20. The Dallas Cowboys sitting at 21. I think the arrow's pointing up for the Patriots at 22. How about that combination? Brian Thomas Jr., not to mention Travis Hunter for the Jags at 23. And can Tua stay upright for the Finns at 24? All right, let's check in on 18, the Chicago Bears. Ben Johnson takes over. We saw what he was able to do with the Lions, and more specifically Jared Goff. Is he the quarterback whisperer for a former number 1 overall pick in Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, 3 years ago, not many people knew who Ben Johnson was. Now he comes in as the savior. I mean, obviously, we put a lot of pressure on him based on what he's done the last 2.5 years with a brilliant offense that he and Dan Campbell really put together in their own in their own image and, their own belief system. And translating that and bringing it over to a quarterback like Caleb Williams, who's played in a structure that he's sort of familiar with, it's going to cause some lumps. I think there are going to be some tough times. Look, they play a brutal schedule, but I think already you can see the fountain of creativity that comes out of this team with different playmakers, different formations, different concepts. It's going to be way more advanced and I think way more productive than last year. But again, I still see some chances there for the head coach and the quarterback to be at odds. I think they're going to have to grow together on this thing. First-year head coach, second-year starting quarterback. It's not going to be an easy ride, but I think eventually they'll find pay dirt, and I think they'll be a very successful duo. But this season with these teams in this NFC North, boy, I don't know. It's asking a lot.
Some growing pains around the Dallas Cowboys without Micah, because now they move on, a double dip on this squad. What is life without Parsons going to look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, you have to lean on the offense at this point. Dak Prescott 2 years ago played at a near MVP level. You still have CeeDee Lamb, ultra productive. You bring in George Pickens. We'll see what the offensive line looks like in the run game. There are questions on that side of the ball. Defensively, though, losing your top pass rusher, your top wild card, your ultimate playmaker, the one guy that offensive coordinators started their game plans to try to short circuit, he's gone now. Yes, that secondary has made a lot of plays over the years, but a lot of it came from the pressure up front. So, Donovan Ezriaku's got to step up as a rookie, and you got to see Sam Williams and these other rushers take that void and find a way. I mean, they're gonna have their hands full the first month of the season, right? I mean, you're facing Parsons in week 4. You've got the Eagles in week 1. A lot of sort of soul searching during that first month of the year, and Brian Schottenheimer's maiden voyage as head coach. Again, a lot to deal with right there.
Yeah. All right, let's get through teams starting at 25 through 32. I think you could story the Raiders being a much better football team than where you have them. The Tennessee Titans at 26. I'm almost surprised. Not a lot of depth on this team that you had them at 26. The G-Men feel good about them at 27. The Colts, it's Daniel Jones's show at 29. Carolina, we saw a push with Bryce Young late. The Jets at 30. The Cleveland Browns at 31, the most talked about quarterback room in the NFL this offseason. And speaking of quarterback rooms, the Saints, they named their starter. It's not Tyler Shuck, it's Spencer Rattler at 32, so they sit dead last. The Giants at 27. I think you could say the product is going to be better this season. I don't know if the wins will be there based off of the schedule alone. Do you buy that?
I think the schedule is right now the biggest thing holding me back. Now, I'm not ready to say that the Giants are playoff contenders. You can see where I ranked them. It's obviously a reflection of a lot of things, right? The last couple of years, the pressure that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen are facing right now. But the arrival of this rookie class with Abdul Carter and Jackson Dart, I think, has changed the trajectory, if you will, or at least the immediate outcome. I think both can be big factors right away. You're going to see other rookies contribute as well. They've got a slew of young, exciting playmakers on both sides of the ball. If that defense can take another natural step up and all those receivers are back and they can make steps as well, they might have something exciting. Look, I don't know that they're going to be this year's Commanders or anything like that, but like you said, the schedule is so tough, but I think there are some wins in there. I think they're going to surprise some people. It may not happen immediately, but it's coming.
All right, so you had Saints dead last. I'm not saying you're wrong here, but why did you slot them at 32?
They clearly wanted Tyler Shuck to win that job right away. He didn't do it. Spencer Rattler didn't win a game as a starter last year. Not saying he can't. He's got talent, but I think they're going to be limited at that position. I think it's, both guys are going to have to feel this pressure of needing to prove themselves to the new head coach, Kellen Moore, and neither one of them may end up being their long-term starter. So the shortcomings of that position, the questions elsewhere on the roster, all the financial mismanagement for years, it's really hurt their talent.
Eric, you're the best, man. Guess news is we have football this week, and we get to do this show next week. Thanks for watching Power Rankings, presented by Energizer.